Foreign tonight, Richard, thanks. At this time last night, we were in Havana, having traveled there with the most senior U.S. officials to visit Cuba in decades, and where today the so-called normalization talks got underway, while the U.S. military base that is part of that island stole some of the attention. Our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell, remains there and has our report from Havana tonight.
Cuba is a country ready for change. Optimism is everywhere. Hope and smiles on the faces of American and Cuban diplomats today. But on the opposite end of the island, a story making waves back home. At the U.S. naval base at Guantanamo Bay, the base commander fired. Captain John Nettleton relieved of his command in connection with an alleged affair with a woman on the base. He is now being investigated by NCIS about the death of her husband, whose body was found floating in the bay. The naval base itself, an irritant to Cuba since 1898, when the U.S. took control. Cuba has long demanded it back. Just one more argument in more than a century of disputes. But now the angry billboards and protests outside the U.S. intersection, the future American embassy, are gone. Anti-American slogans like this one, replaced by billboards promoting tourism, complicated negotiations on trade, travel, banking, and internet access. And the U.S. diplomat says human rights.
We do have differences in that subject, profound differences with the Cuban government, and it was part of the conversation today.
Her Cuban counterpart.
This process is about the establishment of civilized relations between two countries with profound differences.
Just a beginning today, says former Cuban diplomat Carlos Alzugaray.
What do you think is going to be the hardest bridge to cross?
We have to abandon our mentality of a siege, under siege, and not react, and try to see things as they really are. And the U.S. has to abandon the idea that somehow Cuba can be pushed around.
Well, the U.S. diplomat, Assistant Secretary Roberta Jacobson, is going to be having breakfast with Cuban dissidents first thing tomorrow, making it clear that on some things, Brian, Cuba and America will agree to disagree. Brian?
Andrea Mitchell from our broadcast location in Old Havana. Andrea, thanks. In this country...